Hey, Alex.
Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
All good, mate. How's it feel now that you're in retirement like the rest of us?
Like the rest of it, I feel, what's the word, liberated? No, that's not right.
Yeah,
That's too strong a word. I feel rejuvenated, maybe. I don't know. It was a busy day, I must say.
excellent. Oh, good.
Yeah, no, they made a nice morning tea. Didn't get the gold watch, though.
Didn't get the gold watch.
No, a bit disappointed, really.
Well, you get into trouble by giving gold watches. Just ask Christina Holgate.
That's true. That's true. Would have been all right if I got a $50,000 bonus, but not a
Yeah, that would have been better than a gold watch.
not a $3,000 gold watch. No.
Yeah.
But I got some nice words. Some nice words were said about me, so that was something.
I'm glad about that.
I got a e-card too, e-greeting card where people sign their name on the back of it. Very nice. They did a good effort, actually. Quite impressive. It was all very good. I was quite happy about it all.
Excellent.
You know, from rooster to feather duster, I emailed myself, testing, and I no longer there. I'm gone.
You're not there.
No, there's a message there. Ring the boss.
Well, I got a call from, is it Isabella?
Oh, really?
Just checking on me.
You go on. What did she want to know?
She wanted to make sure she had my banking details correct.
Yeah, I thought so. That was all right. Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I've told her she needs to do a few things, get them right.
I got the most amazing phone call today.
Mm.
This guy from India rings me up and he says, hello, I'm from Telstra. And I said, oh, yeah. He says, look, it's a problem with your account and we're going to close it off.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, well, go ahead and do it. And he goes, you know, where there's a problem with your account. I said, yeah, well, if you have to close it, that's fine. And anyway, he was struggling a bit. And then I said, you know what, this sounds like absolute BS. I haven't been with Telstra for years. Oh, no, you don't understand. Everything comes through us. I said, okay, well, tell me who my provider is. And the phone went dead.
You should have strung her on for another hour. He would have dropped his commission rate right now.
Well, I tried to string him along for a while, but I was in the middle of doing something and I was actually annoyed once I realised what was going on.
Yeah, you run out of patience with all this rubbish.
But I had a bit of fun. I sat down and said, okay, that's fine. Just cut it off. It's not a worry. I don't have a problem with that.
Very good.
Anyway.
That's good. Well, I had a little speech.
What have we got? Oh, we're connected to audio. Danny's there. Hello, Danny.
Who's there?
Danny Katz. Hi, Danny.
Ah, Darren.
How are you?
That's number 3. So there's 3 of us now. That's good.
Everyone else has probably turned up at the shul. I'm just too tired.
I didn't believe. No. It's just still starting, isn't it? 8:31. That's right. I suppose they're abolishing the Zoom, are they? Because they want everyone to come back.
I don't know.
I haven't heard.
I had one of those busy days today, Alex.
Yeah. You went golfing? Didn't you?
Golf, yeah.
Tough life. Got a call from Ben at 7 o'clock. I was just driving back into the garage after a heavy day's work. And Ben says, no, so what's it like to be retired now? I said, Ben, I've just come home.
Same old. I haven't nothing different yet.
The first person to ring me and ask me what it's like to be retired. I haven't even had time to savor it yet.
Well, tomorrow you can go with Gilda down to the beach and go for a walk. Don't worry about any deadlines. And
no, I'm on this school run in the morning. I've got commitments already.
Already?
Yeah, they didn't waste any time. Oh, you pick up the kids 7:15? Can you do that?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
How are we?
We're well.
Are we all?
Well, I'm well. How are you?
We're doing very well. Oh my goodness, Darren. Hello. Really on the job.
I'm going to mute
He's
myself
on mute.
now.
Okay, all good. I'm just gonna. Sorry. Okay, what? Hello, Dion. How you doing? Welcome. Sorry. Got to get through the share. You know.
So I picked that one up last week.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we've got a little bit left of book 9, and then we will proceed to. Did you turn it off? It was on for so long. I guess the Hester boys prefer it much colder. I think it's winter in Israel now. So okay, we are at the end of book 9 basically right now. We're dealing with Pesukei de Zimra, and with we sort of left it that we need to deal with the interruptions. So the order of priorities. So not interruptions in terms of if someone comes late to shul. We were discussing what the order is that in terms of what do you skip in Pesukei de Zimra. I think that's where we're up to. I'll just tell you the exact page. And then is Peter coming or did he leg it? He was in the Morah Chabra now. So how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. I forgot my timetable. I don't know if you saw, I usually have like this thing like twist, and then when people ask questions, I get them twisted because I'm for the people on Zoom. Then all good. Okay. It's cold in here. Okay. Rambam. Okay, well now Tzurba will give us okay. Okay, let me find the exact page. We are on page. So basically there's the final, just to remind everyone, there's the final chapter of book 9, which we're going to save to Sukkot because it's about Hilcha Arba Minim. So I think we'll do closer to Sukkot. So we're going to skip that. We're going to start 10. But first we've got a little bit to finish at 9. You don't forgive me if we don't have 9 in front of you. We'll just okay. So let's we are on page, let's find it. It is on page 200 and book 9, we're on page 26. No, it's 225. Here we go. 260. Okay. 260. I'm going to share screen. That's what we left off last time. I didn't want to rush the end of the book as much as I really wanted to start a new book today. I didn't want to rush the end of the book because there basically have official discussions as to what actually you're allowed to do. So we've been basically, let's just summarize what we're up to. A lot of people have joined on Zoom. Excellent. Okay. So ready? Everyone's got their whiskey? Okay. So we discussed in general this idea that Pesukei de Zimra is a later takana, right? It's not mentioned explicitly in the Gemara, this idea of Pesukei de Zimra, other than Ashrei. The text of Baruch She'aman Yishtabach are mentioned, and other parts of Pesukei de Zimra are not really mentioned in the Gemara at all, and it seems to have sort of come about officially at sort of times of the Gaonim at a later stage. And therefore, if a person is late to shul for whatever reason, we spoke about the idea that a person would skip various parts of Pesukei de Zimra in order to make sure that they start their Shmoneh Esrei with the community, with the Kehillah, and that way they're still fulfilling the mitzvah of Tefillah B'Tzibur. And it's better to forego bits of Pesukei de Zimra, which is a later takana, rather than to say all of Pesukei de Zimra and then basically miss davening with a minyan because you only get to Shmoneh Esrei when they're already basically finishing. And that's what we discussed. So we're on page 260 here. The Shulchan Aruch at the top of page 260. Actually, sorry, it's the end of page 259, but we started to discuss last time. And we said there in source 15, the end of page 259, Im ba lebeit hakneset, a person comes to shul, umatzat savor besof tzibur besof Pesukei de Zimra. They find the community is already at the end of Pesukei de Zimra. So what do? The Shulchan Aruch says, Omer, you say Baruch she'amar ad me'ula b'tishbachot. So you just say the Baruch of Baruch she'amar, v'achar kach tehillah David, and then afterwards you say Ashrei, because that's sort of the main part of Pesukei de Zimra. V'achar kach, and afterwards you say Halalu et Hashem min hashamayim, which is the third halaluka, right? We say 5 halalukas after Ashrei. So you say the third one. And also v'achar kach, and afterwards Halalu Halalu kel b'kodsho, which is the 5th halaluka. The reason that you would say, if you're running out of time, you'd say Baruch she'amar Ashrei, the 3rd halaluka and the 5th halaluka, is because don't remember that was Shitat Rashi. According to Rashi, the halalukas that you only say 3 and 5. In that way, you're at least fulfilling the halalukas that you're supposed to say according to the opinion of Rashi. And kol hashmat halakha. Okay, over the page 260. V'achar kach, and afterwards yishtabach. And then you say Yishtabach, and after that, then you start, after Baruch, everything in order. Yotzeh, the bracha of Yotzeh, Kriyat Shema, Kriyat Shema with its brachas, Palel Imat Sibur, and you daven your meter together with the Kihila. V'im ein shahut kolkach, and if you don't have so much time, says the Shulchan Aruch, Yedaleg gam mizmar halu et Hashem in Hashemayim. You should also skip the other halalukas. Just say Baruch She'amar, or he says to skip the third halaluka. The Ramah goes further though, Hagar. The im od ein shahut, if you don't even have that much time, lo yamar rak Baruch She'amar tehillah ladavid v'yishtabach. If you have no time at all, basically just say Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach, and then everything after Baruch you have to say. And you should also say the bracha of Shachar. So the Ramah is the one who brings the final version. We saw there were two different versions of the Gaonim, but basically the minimum is Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach, and then you say with the Kihila. That's what it seems at this stage. We said that there was an exception though, is that the bracha in the morning that a person shouldn't wait till afterwards. And the Mishnah Berurah brings this in source 16, namely Natilat Yadayim, Ashay Yatzar, and Birkat Torah. Those are things that you should recite before davening always. Yes.
So if you finish those sections, you caught up with those sections with the Kihila, then you go back and say the parts you missed out?
Yeah, you should say you should say what you skip afterwards. We're going to talk about a person who skips Pesukei Zimra entirely. We'll talk about that. There's a machloket whether you're allowed to do that. But right now we're assuming the bare minimum for Pesukei Zimra is Baruch She'amar, Ashrei, and Yishtabach, because Ashrei is the main that was mentioned in the Gemara. Okay, so we look in source 16, and the Mishnah Berurah brings that nonetheless a person should not skip the bracha until at Yadayim, which we typically do in the morning, and Elokai Neshama and Birkat Torah. Those are things you should not skip. You should say explicitly at the beginning before davening, because don't remember there were, and I'm not going to read it inside, but that's source 16. And again, because we saw that there were opinions who said that that if you miss Birkat Torah by somebody in the middle of davening, I forgot to say Birkat Torah beforehand. So we saw that there were opinions that said that Ahava Rabbah, the bracha before Shema, can actually, if you have kavanah, that will also cover you instead of Birkat Torah, especially if you learn after davening. And therefore, these things you shouldn't skip. In terms of actual priority order, they have a really nice order in the back of the art scroll where it has like the list of priorities. But also, if you're running out of time, what you're supposed to do if you have a little bit more time, if you're late. And so people who are frequently late, they should know that page in the art scroll. But the Piskei Tshuva here brings basically the list of priority orders in source 17. He brings the priority as follows. So he starts off there in source 17. We won't read it aside now. But he basically says the things you have to say, what we already said, Baruch She'amar, Ashrei Yishtabach, and the various brachot beforehand, putting talit and tefillin, etc. You're supposed to say before. And then here in the middle of source 17, he brings the list of things. Well, if you have more time than that, this is what you should say. So he says then in some page 261, start with Hallelujah Kel B'Kodsho, the fifth Hallelujah. Meaning besides for Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach, say the fifth Hallelujah. If you have a bit more time, number 2, Hallelujah Hashem in Hashemayim. That's the third Hallelujah. If you have a little bit more time, Yomar me Ashrei ad kol haneshama tehelka. So then you should just say Ashrei and all the Hallelujahs. You have more time, Mizmor Latoda. More time, you should Yosif v'Yvarech David ad l'Shem Tvatecha. The first paragraph after the Hallelujahs v'Yvarech David, and then Az Yashir, and then he goes on to say then the Pesukim at the beginning, Pesukei of Hodu, right? Everything at the beginning after Baruch She'amar. And then finally at the end he says Mizmar Shir Chanukat Habayit David, because that is not really part of Pesukei Zimra at all. He said it before Yishtabach, at least according to Ashkenazi, even I go in Sfardim as well, but it's not in Pesukei Zimra at all. It's actually before. So Mizmar Shir Chanukat Habayit David is the first thing to go, because that's like not even part of the unit of Pesukei Zimra. And then obviously Birkat HaShachar, which can be recited afterwards, and Karbanot is last. He brings a discussion there about Nishmat on Shabbat. So Nishmat, right? Nishmat Kol Chai on Shabbat. Should I be saying that? What's more important, Nishmat Kol Chai or the regular Pesukei Zimra? If I haven't got time, I come late to shul Shabbos morning, because I forgot to sign up and I'm negotiating with the guard or whatever it is. Then the question is, what do I do? So he brings two opinions here. Regarding Nishmat. He says Nishmat Kol Chai says, some people say, firstly, Nishmat Kol Chai is more important on Shabbat than the other bits of Pesukei Zimra, because Nishmat Kol Chai was a special part of Pesukei Zimra which was enacted especially for Shabbat and Yom Tov. But he does bring here the end there on page 261, V'yeshom, and there are those that say Shepsuke de Zimra code mem nishmat. The Psuke de Zimra, the regular Psuke de Zimra, is more important than Nishmat, which is a special edition for Shabbat. Why? The tadir ve'eno tadir kodem. I like the principle that the frequent thing always trumps the less frequent, and therefore regular Psuke de Zimra beats Nishmat. So there's a machloket about this, and if you want, you can see over the page as well. He brings that. Then similarly, he also, I'm not going to read it now just because it's very arduous, but he goes through basically here also the different orders of the different special editions for Shabbat, which takes priority over which. Practically speaking, I said a lot of these things you can get in the Siddur as well. But the Piskei Tshuva here basically brings a list. Just regarding that last question of what's more important, regular Psukei de Zimra or Nishmat. If I don't have time, so the Piskei Tshuva brought both opinions as to which goes first. Rav Avadia goes like the second opinion. Rav Avadia Yosef, or son of Yitzchak Yosef, brings here in source 18, in the bold there in source 18, Mutav sheyedaleg Nishmat kol chai. It's better to skip Nishmat v'lo yedaleg al Psukei de Zimra rather than to skip the regular Psukei de Zimra. Again, the reason being because tadir she'eno tadir kodem. We always prefer the thing which is said more frequently. That's his psak. There are those who disagree. That's just a little bit in terms of the order. What's interesting, if we go to page 264, source 19, the Ber Hete brings the minhag of the Arizal, because we've assumed until now that tefillah b'tzibur, davening with the minyan, is more important than saying all of Psukei de Zimra. And that is the contemporary opinion. It's better to skip past Psukei de Zimra to get on time so you start your Shmona Esrei with the community as a minyan. But the Kabbalists didn't do this. And in source 19 there, in the bold, it cites from the minhag of the Ari, v'harbe anshe maaseh, in source 19, many pious people, nohagim lehitz palel keseder. Even if they're late, they would daven in order, mitam zeh, afilu im ichru levo lebeit haknesset, even if they came late. Because in some sort of understanding of the spiritual planes, you don't want to switch around Psukei de Zimra if you're a Kabbalist, because every psalm and every piece of Psukei de Zimra has some sort of effect in the higher world. As you can see, I'm a very big Kabbalist, right? Not a Gushnik at all, right? So, sorry, if they were pious, if they were that pious, they wouldn't be late to shul. I like that. It's very good. But so there's some that have the minhag of the Ari, and they say even if they're late to shul, and you see it, especially. You see it in. I've been checking who's present here. You get in trouble. Is Manny there? Is Manny there? No. Okay. So you see it like in a lot of in Chabad places that that they'll come and there'll be extra kavana over the Psukei de Zimra, and I midway through laning I look over and they're still in Shema, because it's following the Arizal that you don't switch Psukei de Zimra around. Zmanim, it's already. Sorry. I wouldn't say it's a serving suggestion. I think it's clear halacha, but there is this other opinion, but that's not the consensus of non-Hasidim, certainly of many, that ultimately Psukei de Zimra, which isn't explicitly mentioned in the Gemara, various parts of it you should forego in order to achieve tefillah b'tzibur, davening with the minyan, which is explicitly in the Gemara. So the question is, well, how far do I take this? What if I come really late to shul and they're up to Baruch? So can I skip all of Psukei de Zimra, put on my talit and tefillin, and just start right after Baruch Yotzei Varech Choshech? So there's a machlokeh between the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah in this regard. In source 20, Im kvar hitchilu hatzibur yotzer. What if they've already started the bracha of Yotzer, meaning they're after Baruch? I'm well late for shul. Ve'ein shahut lomar Psukei de Zimra afilu b'dilug. And there's not enough time to say Psukei de Zimra even with skipping. Even just to say Baruch Shema Ashrei Yishtabach, there's not enough time. The Shulchan Aruch says in source 20, Yikra kriyat Shema Birchotech imat tzibur. You should read kriyat Shema with its brachot with the minyan, but yitpalel imahem, and skip it. In other words, skip Psukei de Zimra entirely. Start after Baruch. But and afterwards, Yikra kol Psukei de Zimra below bracha shelifnehem v'lo shalach reihem. Afterwards, go back and say the psukim, the tehillim from Psukei de Zimra without the brachas Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. The brachas we don't repeat. And this is based on the psak of the Rosh. Although the Rosh did say you could say the brachas, but here he rules that you don't say the brachas. So if you're really late, the Shulchan Aruch says you can actually forego Psukei de Zimra entirely and start just with Yotzei Varech Choshech. After davening. After davening, you go back and say, from Hodu all the way to Az Yashir, without the brachas of Baruch She'amar.
detention.
Sorry, you have to stay back after class, right? So no, I don't think it means after Kedusha. I think it means after davening. I wouldn't be like reciting this necessarily in Chazarat Hashatz, I think. But the Mishnah Berurah doesn't allow any skipping. He says you can skip to the bare minimum of Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach, but he disagrees. He quotes Mishkan Yaakov, who says you cannot skip Sukkot Zimra entirely. In source 21. And we've seen this before because remember, Mishnah Berurah had this whole like Masora that even though it's not actually in the Gemara, Baruch She'amar is in fact quite old. And it's from the times of the Anshe Knesset Agadola, the Men's Great Assembly, the beginning of the Second Temple times, and therefore it's not something you should just so easily forego. In source 21,
The Mishnah Berurah disagrees. So make an exception if you're the 10th person from the room. So if you're the 10th person, so you have to
You're the
basically
10th person.
respond with then review for Baruch or for Kaddish, whatever else. So then in that case, govern with the minion and then go back and say, well, Princess, you can't skip. But if you're the 10th
if you're the
person,
10th person, then it's an interesting question. But the Mishnah Berurah, let's just see what he says inside though, in source 21. Let's see his the way he puts it in source 21. Yikra Kriyishma, he says, Ubishuat Mishkanat Yaakov, here Rich Bazeh. So he cites the Mishkanat Yaakov who proves, it goes to great length, and proves the Birkat Baruch She'ama V'yishtabach Takana Kadumahi, even though it's not actually mentioned in the Gemara, Baruch She'ama Yishtabach is in fact an ancient Takana, Mimeha Tanaim, from the days of the Tanaim, but Al-Ken, and therefore Mutav Palel B'yechidi, it's better to daven B'yechidut, to daven on your own, Misha Yidaleg Legamre, Birkat Baruch She'ama V'yishtabach, better to do that than to skip the whole of Sukkot Zimra entirely. So he doesn't like skipping. There he says, and everyone agrees if you have enough time, you should certainly say Baruch Shema Ashrei Yishtabach. But he brings this opinion. So we have that you can skip entirely if it means you're going to be really late. And the question is, what do? You have Machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. Can you skip? So different poskim can do different things. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu there in source 22 says that yeah, you shouldn't skip the whole thing. You should always say Baruch She'amar Ashrei and Yishtabach, and you it's better to always say that bare minimum, even if it means you're going to miss your Amida with everyone else.
And repeat the things.
And of course, repeat the things that you miss afterwards. But right. But the Yalkut, sorry,
and
repeat the things you've already said, because he wants to say it all in order, because that's what you do if you're a Kabbalist. But Rav Yitzchak Yosef, again following his father's footsteps, that you follow the Shulchan Aruch's word is law, and the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to skip it, and if you're really late, you can skip it. And source 23 says it's best, to be on time, but the bold at the end of source 23 says if you're going to be late and miss davening with a minyan, Yidaleg Legamre has mirots, skip Hazukei Zimra entirely, V'yatchil Birkat Yotze'ar, and start from the bracha of Yotze'ar, Kadei sheyaspik leitpalel im hatzibur, so that you make sure you daven with the minyan. At least Chazarat Hashatz, we start at the same time as the Chazan. And he says at the end in the bold, the level, the virtue of davening with a minyan is great. But docha amirat zemirot is more important than the same Sukkot Zimra. Davening with a minyan is more important than Sukkot Zimra, and that's what he says. So there's a machlokes in that regard.
his first statement is also.
Sorry?
His first statement is also very important.
Yeah, but his first statement is, what should you do? Yeah, you're right, I skipped it because I'm desperate to get to 10. What can I say? I'm for Yetzer Hara. But his first statement there at the beginning of source 23, you're quite right. Lechatchila, ideally, ra'oi v'nachon, it's absolutely proper and appropriate. Lavo lebeit hakneset b'hashkama. Get there early. Kadei shelo yitzrech l'daleg. You shouldn't skip. So that's what he says there. That really you should try and come on time. But certainly tefillah trumps random pieces of Sukkot Zimra. I think there's a little bit here about machshava, but I think I'd like to actually move to book 10, Birshutchem, where we're going to leave Sukkot Zimra. And those who don't have it at home, I've got one to share with you online. Although they just changed it up, so rather than they don't give me a PDF anymore. No, they don't give me a PDF. They give me the interactive book online. Can you? What's example? I just need to do share screen. Sorry.
Rabbi, can I?
Oh, I missed it. Is Ezra Big? Is that from his book on Tefillah? Yeah, but which book? Because I just translated his book. It's coming out in the summer or in the winter here. What? Oh, so that one not so much. But Well, I'll let you read that in its own time because I want to get onto to book 10, which is where we're going to discuss. I'm sorry, I heard a question. Darren, was that a question?
Yeah, it was just a quick question. So I was just I don't think we clarified. If you do skip some parts, but not all of it, you do the essentials. Do you go back after you finished and say what you missed or not?
Yes, you're supposed to go back and say what you missed. Right, that was clear in the poskim. Even if a person skips all of Pesukei Zimra entirely, like Shulchan Aruch, because they want to reach Shmona Esrei on time, nonetheless, they should go back and recite everything they missed, but not Baruch She'amar Nishtabach. The brachot themselves, we don't skip.
No, but you should have said those anyway. I know what you mean. Okay, now, and on Shabbos, do you go back and say, if you're not up to, like, I often don't quite make nishmat by the time they're doing Baruch?
So strictly speaking, on Shabbos, you're supposed to go back and say the regular stuff, but not necessarily the Shabbos additions. That's I believe the consensus. So you see, they give me this nice fancy digital copy, so it's page to whatever. Okay, so here we are. Okay, the new book, book 10. Do you have book 10, or you need a copy? You take one. I have to write you down, or I get in trouble with Ray when she gets back. Okay. Sorry.
I got one out of the lake, so hopefully she's down.
Sorry, all good. I'm sure she's. You're probably good. All right, I'll check. All right. So please feel free to go get your copies from the office though at some point. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Siruf Laminyan, the idea of what constitutes a minyan and who can join a minyan, and the idea of needing a minyan for Davar Shebek Kedusha. Because now we've discussed Pesukei Zimra, Birkat Shachar, the beginning of book 10. We're now going to discuss what constitutes a minyan. This is probably quite small for you, I'm guessing, right? I'm going to have to zoom in here. Try and be fancy with new technology, just makes life more complicated. Okay, so we're on page 23 is where it begins, and that is the requirement to actually have a minyan for Dvarim, what we call Dvarim Shebek Kedusha, which are matters of sanctity. The idea that you're supposed to have a minyan for various things. Actually, this is no good because I can't select. Oh, I have to zoom in. I'll work it out. Okay, all right. So I got it. Now I have to press Control. Okay, so the first source in Kaf Aleph, the Gemara in Kaf Aleph, sorry, this is source 1 on page 23. The Gemara in Brachot talks about this idea of Kedusha. Now it's not clear what Kedusha means in the Gemara, but certainly it refers to Dvarim Shebek Kedusha, matters of sanctity. But unlike perhaps other religions where this idea of praying as individuals, we have tefillah b'tzibur. In fact, Rav Soloveitchik spoke about the idea of not only tefillah b'tzibur, but tefillat hatzibur. That tefillah, and there's the question of chazarat hashatz, the repetition of the Amidah, can often be seen not just as the repetition of the tzibur or for the tzibur, but also tefillat hatzibur. It's not just tefillah for the congregation or of the. It's tefillah by the congregation, and that's what's really unique about Yahadut, about Judaism, the idea that the congregation is the one that are davening, and we are the medium. The minyan is a medium by which the congregation as a whole are davening. And so let's see this idea of minyan. So the Gemara in Brachot discusses it in source 1. The Gemara there says as follows. Amar Rav Ada Bar Hava says as follows in source 1. Minayin, how do we know she'ein hayachid omer kedusha? That an individual cannot start kedusha. Shene'emar, as it says, v'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael, that I shall be sanctified in the midst or among b'nei Yisrael. Kol davar shebekdusha lo yehei pachot me'asara. So it's not really clear what the limit is. The Gemara simply says that the pasuk says, "I will be sanctified among b'nei Yisrael." Okay, but that doesn't tell me what b'nei Yisrael is. Where do I know 10? So it just says anything with kedusha should be no less than 10. The Gemara says, "What do you mean?" My mashma. How's this inferred? Well, how do I know that? The Tani Rabbanai, the Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So Rabbanai, the brother of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, taught as follows. Atya toch toch. There's something called a gzera shava, right? Or a verbal analogy that it says in this pasuk, v'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. It says toch in the midst of, by us. Ktiv hacha says here v'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. Ktiv hatam, and elsewhere it also says in the story of Korach, it says, Hi badalu mitoch ha'edah hazot. Separate yourselves mitoch. Again, toch, from among this congregation. Malahalan asara, afkan hasara. Just like there, regarding Korach, it talks about 10 people. It talks about an Ada, a congregation. So to here, it talks about 10 people. What's the problem? For some reason, they left off the rest of the Gemara here. There's really a three-way Gezerah Shavah. It says v'nikdashti v'toch b'nei Israel, toch in the midst of. That relates back to the story of Korach, where it says hibadlu mitoch ha'eda zot, separate yourself from the midst of the Ada. But okay, so I now know that there's an idea that nikdashti, I have to be sanctified among an Ada, a congregation. Ada is like Ada, right? Adas, right? So Ada is congregation. But how do I know that a congregation means 10? So the answer is because it also says Ada where else? By the Meraglim. The Meraglim, it calls them an Ada. It calls them an Ada Ra'ah, bad, evil congregation. It calls them an Ada Ra'ah, an evil congregation. Now, how many of the spies were bad? There were 12 spies. But Yeshua and Caleb were good. So who were the Ada Ra'ah? The 10 others. So that's how we learn 10. Ada, which means congregation, is learned by the word that says Ada regarding the spies. Ada Ra'ah, it says, the evil, and that was by the Meraglim. And by the Meraglim in Parashat Shlach Lecha, it says Ada by the 10 spies, and that's why 10 is an Ada, a congregation. And that's where we learn this idea of congregation from. And therefore, we have Davar Shebedusha, anything of sanctity requires an Ada, which is 10, a congregation, which is 10. So if we go over the page there, in source 2, Rambam brings this halacha lemaisa in source 2. Just zoom in again. In source 2, Rambam says as follows: V'chen, and similarly, lo yihyeh echad mevarach birkat shema b'kol shomim v'onim acharav amen ela ba'asara. Here in Hilchot Tefillah, he talks about the idea that a person should you should have this idea that hearing and having a chazan at the front and people answering amen should only be done with asara, with 10. The ein omrim kaddish ela ba'asara. You only do kaddish when there's a minyan of 10. The ein akanim nosim yedehem ela ba'asara. And you can only kohanim can only duchon if there is 10. Shekol asara me Yisrael heim hanikarim Ada. In light of the Gemara we just saw in Brachot, 10, a group of 10 is called an Ada, a congregation. Shneimar, as it says, Ad matayla Ada hara'ah zot, right? So that's the pasuk from Shlach regarding the Meraglim spies. It calls them an Ada ra'ah. V'hayu asara, and there were 10 bad spies. Shahara yatsu Yehoshua v'Kaleb, because it doesn't include Yehoshua and Caleb. So an Ada is constituted by 10 people. He goes on there in Halacha Vav in source 2. B'chol davar kedusha, any matter of holiness, lo yehei ela b'toch ha'Ada miYisrael. It's got to be a minyan from Israel. As it says, v'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Israel. Basically, Rambam is just passing the Gemara we see. And Ada is 10 people. So even though it says here, in the Rambam, it's practically quoting Psukim, right? Based on the Gemara, it's quoting Psukim with the Meraglim, Psukim from Korach. Nonetheless, this is a rabbinic din. And the Ran points this out in source 3. In source 3, the Ran says, V'afal gav, even though dahu yalif, this is learned out, medichtiv, from the fact that it says in the Torah itself, hibadlu mitoch ha'eda hazot, separate yourselves from this congregation, that you learn the Gezerah Shava from the fact that it says toch twice, among, davar halamed b'Gezerah Shava, chozem halamed Gezerah Shava, that you learn it through a Gezerah Shava from one place to another, but mihu nonetheless, hani mili kulu asmachta de Rabbananim. They are what we call in halachic terms an asmachta. Even though it's quoting strictly from the Torah, it's only an asmachta. It's a support from the Torah, but itself only has rabbinic validity. To say that tefillah gufad rabbanan, right? The very siddur of tefillah is rabbinic by nature. So even though they're quoting psukim to back themselves up, it's what we call an asmachta. It's a translation for asmachta would be like it's a hint basically, or it's a support. Or it's a hyperbolic support, if you like. Asmachta is like hyperbole. This idea that the Torah, there's a hint to it, it's alluded to in the Torah, even though, of course, it's only rabbinic by nature. The Shulchan Aruch, yes.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Isn't it problematic using those two examples that Moses enjoyed to remove himself from this congregation, and the other one was with Korach to remove himself from this congregation, And the situation of the Meraglim was to remove himself from the congregation. In both cases, he's told to be removed from. At no point is he told to go to a congregation to sanctify God.
So it'd be interesting. What you're saying is that Moshe Dafka told Hibadlut, right? They're supposed to, all the Am Yisrael are supposed to remove themselves. So if that was where we actually learnt tefillah from, then I'd be more bothered. But we're not really learning tefillah from there. We're really rather being learning what an Eidah is, what a congregation is. That's what I learned. I learned from there, not the context of a tefillah, the obligation of tefillah, but I'm learned from there the definition of what an Eidah is, what a congregation is. A congregation is a group of people who come together for a certain purpose. So in the case of Korach, it was they were coming together for the rebellion. In the case of the spies, it was they were coming together to try and bring a bad report on Israel, about Eretz Israel. Ironically, we learned that what are we supposed to do with an Eidah? We're supposed to take the examples of Eidah in the Torah and say, okay, they congregated together for Broigus, right? Korach was a Broigus, and obviously the spies was also a Broigus, trying to make the people worried. We're supposed to make Halkahilot not to cause Broigus, right? And we're supposed to take an Eidah, right? We don't do that here at all, right? We don't do Broigus.
I'm more worried, Rabbi. I'm more worried about the fact that we've got two examples which are both negative.
Right.
Like,
one is called an Eidah Ra'ah, right?
Yeah, exactly, and a congregation.
Right, so we're not learning there the obligation of tefillah. We're not learning there the obligation of tefillah. What we're learning from there is the definition of an Eidah.
Yeah, I understand. That's what I mean. That's my
I think
worry.
If anything, right, it's a worry, but if anything, it's mussar for us that we take the concept of an Eidah and we say the power of the people can actually be wielded for good. And I think we should take it more on that spin. That this is examples of how Am Yisrael on their sojourns in the Midbar, use the power of the people for bad. And we're supposed to take that, capture that power and use it for good. But I do hear your points. But if we look just over to, I didn't mean to skip a page. This is too advanced for me, this program. I'm going to ask for an old-fashioned.
Okay, thanks.
But okay, so in source, I hope that sways you a little bit. It's not the obligation of tefillah; it's the notion of what an Eidah is. But in terms of and source 4 here, the Shulchan Aruch brings it quite explicitly, and already by the days of the Shulchan Aruch, it was accepted that 10 people refers to 10 males. I'm not going to go into the idea of the question of why women can't be counted for a minyan here, but there are in the footnotes here a couple of excellent articles. There's one by Frummer, right? Frummer from the 80s, like late 80s. That's when it was. There's also an article online, Deracheha, which is Deracheha is a wonderful organization. It's also affiliate of the Gush, where it's run by Yoatzot Halacha, where they basically deal with questions of women and mitzvot. And you can read some articles online if you look at footnote 3. They refer to discussions there. Regarding the question of women and minyan. But if we look at source 4, the Shulchan Aruch rules, Omrim Kaddish, you recite Kaddish, the Ein Omrim Oto B'Pachot Meyud Scharim, right? That it shouldn't be fewer than 10 males. B'nei Chorin, they've got to be free, meaning Avadim, servants, slaves, are not do not count for a minyan. Gedolim, they've got to be adults. Sheviu Beit Sarot, right? They've reached puberty, right? They have 2 pubic hairs. Behu Adin L'Kedusha U'Baruch. And the same thing is true for Kedusha and Baruch Hu she'ein ne'amrim b'chol me'asara. You do not recite them with fewer than 10. So the Shulchan Aruch Pasuk is obviously based on everything that we've just seen in the Gemara. That's the case. So okay, great. So you need 10 people, and they're supposed to be gedolim, supposed to be adults. Is there ever a scenario where we would count a katan, a minor, a child, for a minyan? Or if we're really stretched? That's the question. Now, it sounds ludicrous to us, but the Gemara and the Poskim really discuss such a case. So let's have a look at the Gemara there on page 26, source 5. The Gemara in Brachot there, and here it's sort of abbreviated, but the Gemara has all sorts of discussions as to Siruf Minyan, who we can include in a Minyan. And the Gemara says as follows there in source 5. Nashim va'avadim uktanim, so women, and also avadim here refers to someone who's halachically a slave, uktanim, and children, ein mezamnim alehem. They are not included in a zimun. Amar Rav Asi says, "Katan hamutal ba'arisa mezamnin alav." No, Rabbi Asi, disagrees and says that a child, even if they're in a cradle, even if they're in a cot, mezamnim alav, they can still join for a zimun. To which the Gemara says, "How can that be? B'hatnan, surely we learn in the Mishnah Nashim va'avadim uktanim ein mezamnim aleihem. That women and avadim and children as well, we don't obligate, we don't include in a zimun. Who the amak Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi? The answer is no. That he's following the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, because Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, Afal pisha amru, even though they said, Katan hamutal ba'arisa, a child who's in a cot, meaning a baby, Amazamnim alav, that you don't include him in a zimun. Nonetheless, aval osinoto snif la'asara. You add him to be basically an addition for 10, a supplement. He can be number 10. We have an opinion here in the Gemara which says that even though a child doesn't join a zimun, they can be the 10th person in the zimun. Only the 10th. They can't be 1 to 9, but number 10 can be a child. There's an opinion like that in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi goes further in the second paragraph of source 5. He goes further. But Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Tisha ve'eved mitztarfin, is not only a minor, but also an eved, so a halachic slave, also joins to a minyan. If you've got 9 b'nei chorin, 9 free men, and 1 eved, an eved joins the minyan as the number 10. May today we bring a challenge from elsewhere. Ma'aser Rabbi Eliezer, surely there's a story of Rabbi Eliezer, shenichnas lebeit knesset, who went into his shul. V'lo matzah asara, he couldn't find a minyan. There weren't 10. There wasn't a minyan. So what did he do? They needed a minyan. It came as great personal cost to him. What did he do? V'shichrer avdo. So what did he do? He freed his slave. So his slave would make up the minyan. V'hishlimo la'asara, and he completed the minyan to number 10. So he got to shul. There were only 9 people. So what did he do? It was mashachrer his eved. He freed his slave, and that way there were 10 for a minyan with his slave. So he lost the slave in order to make sure there was a minyan. This implies shichrer in. If you do release a slave, they do count. Lo shichrer lo. But if they're still a slave, they do not count as part of the minyan. To which the Gemara says, no, there's no proof from there, because maybe trey is strichul. Maybe they were too short for a minyan. They needed 2. Shichrer echad, so he released 1 of his avadim. V'nafik b'chad, and then the 10th one maybe made up. The 10th one was the other eved. So there's no proof from there. But it's really bizarre Gemara here, trying to find the various. This Gemara here, I mean, you come across it in Bracha. Also, I believe this Gemara also comes up in Masechet Gittin, because the Gemara in Gittin talks about the status of avadim, slaves there in there. So this Gemara comes up in Gittin as well. It's a fascinating Gemara. It's just like one of those bizarre Gemaras where you just go, what is going on here?
That's like a pocket, like asking for the pocket French stand that the objection, like the little trade that where do they come?
No, but that's the point. We don't know what the story was.
Yeah.
We don't know what the story is. So the same way that you're assuming there was 9, I'll assume there were 8. Now it's more of there was an incident. Right. There was an incident. He couldn't find 10. He didn't say lo matzah asiri. It says lo matzah asara. Couldn't find a minyan. So what did he do? A great personal cost to himself. He released an eved. Correct. But it's a story, and the question is, can Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's strange position that an eved can count as number 10, can that work?
So I think we've actually released 9 of his slaves, and then
in theory, he could have released, but they would lose all his slaves. It's very expensive to lose a slave. So it says there, it's a bizarre Gemara for us to hear. But the heichi avid hachi, how can you do this? Says the Gemara. V'amar Rav Yehuda, not for the reasons you're thinking, how can you do this? For a different reason. V'amar Rav Yehuda, surely Rav Yehuda said, Kol mashachar avdo over ba'aseh. Anyone who releases a slave violates a mitzvah aseh. Shnema, because it says in the Torah, le'olam behem ta'avodu. Right? The Torah tells us that you must enslave them forever. We're talking here about a non-Jewish slave. So you're not supposed to release slaves. This is the Gemara. This is the context of the discussion of the Gemara in Masechet Gittin around this. We're talking about non-Jewish slaves here, and Eved Kanani. That's what we're talking about. And Eved Kanani does not join the minyan.
Yeah, but Eved Kanani releases him.
We've got to convert. The assumption is there was some sort of tefillah. The Tosfot they discuss it there and Gittin as well, I believe. The answer is lidvar mitzvah shani. If the person of mitzvah, you're allowed to do it. It's a bizarre Gemara. Either way, let's skip to the end of the Gemara. There, mitzvah of aveira. How can you do that? It's a mitzvah which is done by the means of an aveira. Mitzvah to rabbim shani. It's all right because it's for a mitzvah for the rabbim, for the public, and therefore we're lenient. But the most important bit is after the 3 dots there. But late hilchata kachol hanishmatata. The halacha is not like any of these teachings. Ella rather kihada amar Rav Nachman. Rather like what Rav Nachman said. Katan hayodeya lamim avarchim ezamnim alam. You can't count just any child for a zimun, but a child who knows to whom he is benching, he can be included in the zimun. And some Sfaradim do this today. Some Sfaradim do this today. They'll include a child from age 6 or 7 as number 3 in a zimun. Not in a minyan, but in a zimun of 3. And we'll discuss that probably more when we get to bench. Correct. Correct. So this is the ambiguity which we're left with. The Gemara was discussing Zimun and then moved to Tefillah. And then the Gemara in the final line went back to Zimun, went back to Umazuma, that you're allowed to count a child who has the intellect to understand that you're praying to God, you can include him in a Zimun. So where does that leave us with a minyan then? And that's the ambiguity, and what ensues is just a massive machlokes rishonim as to how to understand this. If we look over the page in source 6, Tosfot bring 3 opinions, and it's just like crazy opinions as to what this means. So the Gemara had multiple opinions there that we just saw in the previous source. Some of them had said a katan, even a child in a cot, could be counted for a zimun. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi went so far as a zimun, but Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi went so far to say that he can count number 10 can be a baby. A baby in a cot. Number 10. He didn't eat. But he can be number 10, he's not davening either, but he can count. He's not answering Amen, he can't talk. But he can be number 10 in a snifl asara. The 10th man, according to Rabbi Shimon Levi, can be a baby. And the question is, and the Gemara at the end seems to reject it regarding Zimun. The question is, in the final line of the Gemara, did we also reject it? Not only regarding Zimun, did we also reject it regarding Minyan? So Rabbeinu Tam, and it's like a very unique opinion, says no. If we look at source 6, Tosfot here cite a few opinions. He starts with Rabbeinu Tam as follows in source 6. Rabbeinu Tam says Tosfot, even though the halacha is not accordant with any of these statements, Mihu nonetheless, says Rabbeinu Tam, halacha Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Amar, who says, Katan mamash or sinatos nifla asara, that a baby can be the 10th person in a minyan. Right? You wouldn't have believed it unless you've seen it in sight. That's the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, one of the great Ashkenazi Rishonim. And when the Gemara concludes the final line on the previous page, that the halacha is not like these teachings, says Tosfot, says Rabbeinu Tam, Lo kai a Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. That statement is not referring to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. V'hu adil l'tefillah. And the same thing is true to tefillah, to katan mitzdarif. A child can join a minyan. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, a katan can join a minyan as number 10. V'dei kanami, and I can prove this too, says Tosfot, says Rabbeinu Tam. The parichala, because the Gemara there asks on him from which story? Says Rabbi Eliezer, from the story of Rabbi Eliezer. Shahaya l'tefillah. Right? That was about tefillah. Right? The story there was about a minyan in shul. And it asks from there, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Dimai b'Birkat HaMazon. It asks a question from tefillah to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, was talking about zimun. So the fact that the two are mixed, the match shows that the two are comparable. That's the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, that number 10, not other people, but number 10 in a minyan can be a child.
How do you know which one's number 10, which one's other people?
Only one of the 10 people can be a child.
Yeah,
Sniff line. It doesn't have to be the 10th person walked in the room. It means, according to Rabbeinu Tam, 1 out of 10 is allowed to be a child. It's fascinating opinion, and Tosfot don't like it at all. This is a regular occurrence. It looks like a regular occurrence, and the poskim discuss how much we rely on it today. It does go further. It doesn't stop at Rabbeinu Tam. It goes what? No, we talk about shat chat, but the question is, what shat chat? Does shat chat mean as a one-off, or does it mean if I live in the middle of nowhere and there's only 9 people consistently? So we'll discuss that. We'll get to it this week, but it's discussed really in the modern. Rav Moshe Feinstein had a Tzurba about it, I believe, and others. But correct, but we're not talking about a zimun of 10 here. We're talking about a minyan. We're talking about a minyan for sure. That 1 out of 10, right? But
Can I just
yes.
Can I just ask you? So the story of Rabbi Eliezer really muddies the waters, because a free Canaanite would not be counted in minyan, and he would not be counted for davening.
This was asked in the room, but I didn't have my turntable today, so you couldn't hear.
Okay.
But basically, the answer is in general is that how is an Eved Kanani freed? An Eved Kanani is just a term that Chazal used for non-Jewish slave. An Eved Kanani is freed. No, but I'm saying they don't go back to being a Kanani, a non-Jew. You free them and you convert them. They become a fully fledged Jew. An Eved Kanani already has gone through Tvila, and if it's a male, Mila, Brit as well. They've already immersed in the mikveh, and the question is, do they need a second Tvila, the Machloket and the Rishonim and Gittin, if they need a second Tvila, immersion in a mikveh, or just to be Meshachrer, to release them, then they automatically become a fully fledged Jew. So the releasing them turns them into a Jew, and maybe they need a Tvila. There's a question if they need to go to the mikveh again, but it's Machloket. But yes, in theory, releasing them means they become a Jew. They don't go back to being goy.
But if he was an Eved Ivri, I could understand it.
No, because they're Gayer L'Shem Eved Kanani. After it's Kanani. So,
Rabbi, can I just say,
Yes.
if he was an Eved Ivri, I would understand that.
well, if he was an Eved Ivri, then he's a
Then
man.
you-
He's a Jewish man.
But he's
So
still an Eved. He's
He can
still
join
an
the minyan
Eved.
anyway.
But
Right.
he's still.
But that doesn't
he's
mean
still
take away his rights to join the minyan.
But he still is an Eved.
So we're dealing with an Eved Kanani because the rule is an Eved Kanani is chayav b'mitzvot keisha. That an Eved Kanani is obligated in mitzvot as a woman, is exempt from positive time bound mitzvot. Therefore, they're not included in a minyan, and that's why he needs to be released. Once he's released, he becomes a fully fledged Jew and is a male, and therefore would be part of the minyan. That's the discussion there. So it muddies the waters, but if in Hilchot Eved Kanani, he becomes a fully fledged Jew. That's the answer to your question. But going back to this sort of, just for our intents and purposes, this bizarre opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, Tosfot don't like it. They say it's explicitly against the Midrash elsewhere. If we look in the middle paragraph there, source 6, in the middle paragraph, Umihu, however, say Tosfot, I don't understand how on earth can Rabbeinu Tam allow to count a child as number 10 for a minyan. Taima, it's astonishing. The Bereshit Rabbah, in the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah, Amar, it says, Alad Rabbi Yeshua Levi, on the statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, it says, Hadahu detema lebirkat hamazon. That might only apply regarding joining a child for benching, for a zimun. Avolet tefillah, but for a minyan in shul, lo, absolutely not. So how can Rabbeinu Tam say that? The Midrash explicitly says that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi only said it regarding a zuman. He never said it about a minyan in shul. So how would Rabbeinu Tam answer such a thing? Rabbeinu Tam would answer, the ein halacha came. The halacha is not like the Midrash. The fisha cholek ala gemara shelanu. It's a machloket between the Gemara in Bracha and the Midrash. And in general, we follow the Bavli against the Midrash. So that's how Rabbeinu Tam would answer. The Vada Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi le'inyan tefillah nami kamar. For sure, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi referred to tefillah as well. How do we know this? Because what's the example that's given as a question against him is a case of Rabbi Eliezer trying to get a minyan together for shul, and therefore the two are analogous. Either way, the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, it will return itself at questions of times of great need through the poskim throughout the eras. But Rabbeinu Tam stands by that a child can be number 10 for a minyan. There's another opinion there. At the end of Tosfot, in the bold there, at the end of source 6, v'yesh metzarfim katan tefillah, and there's another opinion who do allow a child to be number 10 for a minyan. Wait for this, even more bizarre. Rak sheyehei chumash biyado, as long as he's holding a chumash in his hand. In other words, a child can be number 10 if they're holding a chumash. So you thought Rabbeinu Tam was crazy. Now we've got another one who's crazy. But Rabbeinu Tam says no. Minhag shtutu. That's an absolute foolish minhag. That's nonsense. The same way they said in the Gemara, Atu Aaron Gavrahu is the ark. A person, there's an opinion in the Gemara that the Aaron itself the ark itself can be the 10th person. And the Gemara says, Atu Aaron Gavrahu, is the Aaron a person? You can't bring the Aaron HaKodesh as an extra person. Hachinami, here too says Rabbeinu Tam. Atu Chumash Gavrahu is holding a Chumash. Does that make him into a person? It's nonsense, says Rabbeinu Tam. Well, Mihu, nonetheless, Ka'ama Yerushalmi says, Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Zimnin, there were times, Achalit in Rabbi Chalafta Abba. I was eating with Rabbi Chalafta Abba at his house. Then Rabbi Chanina bar Sarsi, with my friend Chanina bar Sarsi, over the page. Below, sorry, zoom in again. Below Mezamnin, second. Below Mezamnin Malvai. They did not make a zimun over me. In other words, they didn't include me in a zimun because I was under bar mitzvah. Until I reached puberty. In other words, they did not count me as a minyan until I was bar mitzvah. And from this Yerushalmi, perish Ri, the Ri Paskins, the Ein Osim Katan Snifla Asara, Lo L'Tfila, Lo L'Birkat Hamazon. Based on this Yerushalmi, we never include a child in a minyan, neither for for benching, to say Elokeinu for benching, nor for a minion. So the Re says, based on Yerushalmi, no, absolutely, it's all rejected. We never count a child for a minion. V'gam haya omer Re, and Re himself says, the end there over the page, Shagam Rabbeinu Tam Atzmo, even Rabbeinu Tam, that crazy opinion we saw earlier, Lo haya noheg la'asot ken. He himself would not actually practice what he preached. La'asot katan snif la'asara. He was not actually accustomed to do this, to actually include a child as number 10. Velo asamaisen. He never actually did it in practice. So even though it's good lomdus, right? It's good for a good Tzurba Shiur, right? And we're very grateful to Rabbeinu Tam for giving us some wacky discussions to talk about. Rabbeinu Tam himself never actually did it, says the Re. Now the Re is also a great nephew of Rabbeinu Tam. So he knows it. He says Rabbeinu Tam never actually practiced this. He said it, but he never passed in this way. And anyway, the halachas like Yerushalmi, we never include a katan, a minor, neither for a zimun nor for a minion. We never include a child, and that's the position of the Re. But the cases are not analogous. You're saying that there's room to say that I would include a child for a zimun, but I wouldn't include a child for a minion. But don't forget, when we say zimun, we're talking about a zimun of 10.
No, but he's talking about a zimun of 3.
Ah.
Because he's telling you, tell me,
Right, he was with these two rabbis. Right. But the Yerushalmi says that even a zimun of 3, you don't include a child. And the Re Paskins like that Yerushalmi.
Maybe for zimun of 3 you don't, for zimun of 3 you do.
Right, and that's what many of the Sfaradim do. Many Sfaradim will count a child who has a certain level of intelligence, 6 or 7 years old, will count a child for a zimun of 3, but not for a zimun of 10. 10 because that requires a minion. They do make this chiluk that you just mentioned. But either way, the Yerushalmi itself said that even a zimun of 3 we don't do with the child. And the Re Paskins that way. So the question is what goes on. Just you've seen this business of the Chumash, so you see Tosfot brought it as a suggestion. My suggestion is that the idea of holding the Chumash is that the child, in some sense, it's not that you're shoving a Chumash on a baby in a cot. The idea that you're showing that the child has a certain level of intellect and understanding that he knows what a Chumash is, and therefore maybe it's like the opinion at the end of the Gemara there. But the Re categorically ruled out counting a child for anything. They have to reach bar mitzvah. Rav Avadia here in Yabia Omer, in source 7, tries to explain that maybe the machloket is all dependent on what the source is. We went back to discussing the source for how do we know a minion? You need an Ada, congregation, right? Now, if it's learned from Ada, from Korach, where it says Ada, then Rav Avadia says, well, they were children there as well. It says who came out. Datan and Aviram came out of their tent. And it says there, Nitzavim, they stood steadfast at their tent. Petach ohalehem, heim ve'unishehem uvnehem v'tapan. Right, them and their wives and their children, and the tapan, their babies, right? So if Ada, we're talking about the Ada of Korach, the congregation who stood up with Korach, that was men, women, and children. If, however, I look at Ada as the source being from the Meraglim, right, from the spies, so there they were all adults. So Rav Avadia wants to suggest the same. My issue with Rav Avadia's limud is, well, then according to that, does that mean that you can count women as well? Because there were also women in the Ada of Korach. So I don't really understand. I don't really understand that. How do we know the Ada of Korach? We don't. It says Ada and it says Ada by. Anyway, you have to revert back to the Meraglim. So that's Rav Avadia's suggestion. Either way, there's a machloket in the Rishonim as to what exactly we do. So the question is, well, so what do you do? And the Rosh here in source 8, and with this, perhaps we'll end him. Actually, we have a couple of minutes. I'm trying to work out my watch is slow or not. Okay, with 9:26. Okay, so I have a couple of minutes. So in source 8 here, the Rosh tries to explain, okay, so what is this sort of half-baked opinion that you can have a katan and a child for number 10? Well, if they're good, then why can't you have more than one child? If they're no good, then you shouldn't have at all. Why is it that you can have one of the 10 as a child? So the Rosh Rabbeinu Asher tries to explain this in source 8. He says, "V'chein perish of Haigon," in source 8 of the page, Rav Haigon explained, the katan ola leminion asara, a katan can count as one of the 10. V'yireh, and it seems the hainu time, and this is the reason that Amrina that we say that afilu mutal ba'arisa mitzdaref. This is the reason that even if that child is in a cot, meaning as a baby, joins as number 10. What's the reason? Says the Rosh. The chol bei asara shchina shruya. But any group of 10, the Shechina is manifest, resides in. Because we learn the idea of the Shechina from the pasuk V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. I will be sanctified b'toch, in the midst of Bnei Yisrael. Yalfina, we say De'orim kedusha ba'asara. That's where we learn it from. Lo shna gedolim v'lo shna ketanim. It makes no difference if they are gedolim or ketanim, if they're adults or children. Karinam Bey, it still applies to them b'toch b'nei Yisrael. They are among the children of Israel. Uvilvad, as long as, on condition, sheyu tish'a gedolim, 9 of them have to be adults. Avot tvei me'achad lo. But if more than one of them is a child, that's no good. Kedamrin gabe eved, just like an eved, tvei me'achad, because when it's more than one child who is not an adult, leka li yakara dishmaya litzarfo. It's not yakara dishmaya. Yakara is Aramaic for covered. Yakar is dear or honor. It's not glory of heaven. It's not honor of heaven. Here it says esteem for heaven to count more than one. In other words, we want males, we want adults, but because of the Ada, and that's what an Ada was learned for from Korach and from the Meraglim. But if it's one, so the Rosh wants to suggest that it's once you've got a group of 10, it's like what we might call like a miut de miut. It's a tiny minority, and it's not bothersome to include one of them who doesn't fall into that category. Again, the Rosh is trying to explain the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam and others. But if it's one, so we don't mind, because primarily it's an adult group, and they're the definition of Ada, a congregation.
There are halakhic differences between a male child and a female child.
So according to Rabbeinu Tam, there might not be. But it's an interesting question. According to Rabbeinu Tam, it might not be a halakhic difference between a male and female baby. The question is, when Rabbeinu Tam says the 10th can be a child, does it mean a male child or not? It's not clear. It's possible that he extends it beyond that. But either way, we saw that the Re didn't like it. He says, absolutely not. We categorically rule out that nowadays. The Bet Yosef brings this, and that basically became more or less minhag in source 9. And we'll continue this next time. But just to see the bold there in source 9, the clearest, the beginning of source 9 there, the clearest of all the positions. Ein osin katan snif asara. We never make a child as number 10. Lebirkat hamazon, for benching, tefillah, or for davening, ad she'avish day sa'arot, until he reaches physical puberty. In other words, until he becomes bar mitzvah. So practically speaking, we rule it out. And the Bet Yosef eventually becomes minhag, and we'll discuss cases of great need in a moment. But and we'll continue with this next time, Bezrat Hashem. So those who don't have a book 10 are invited to purchase one from the office. They're waiting for you. And we will continue our discussion with Cyril Flaminian next week. Please God. Shkoyach again to Michael for whiskey. I'll have another one for the road, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Shkoyach.
Take
Thank
care.
you very much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob.